Uh, Playhouse reviews.
Hello, YouTube. This is the very first episode of Playhouse Reviews. So, yes, it's a very exciting time. This is me and my brother. I'm Jamie, and you are?
Charlie?
Yeah, and we're two brothers who just love movies. And during this pandemic, we just want to keep talking about movies and share our love. Charlie, what are some of your favorite movies, and why do you want to make this channel?
Yeah, so if I had to pick one favorite movie, it's definitely Old Boy, the Korean one, not the terrible American one. My favorite genre of movie is by far horror. I love Asian cinema. I love like coming of age indie movies. My favorite directors are probably like Nicholas Winding Refn and Chyon Sono. They both make amazing movies.
Yeah, same. I mean, we're brothers. We both love similar movies. I love horror as well, horror and comedy. Some of my favorite horror movies would be House of the Devil and then The Thing, classic. And then one of my favorite directors is Nicholas Winding Refn. Everything he makes is great, especially Only God Forgives and Drive. They're just beautiful looking movies. I love the dark crime subject matter and good dramas. But yeah, those are some of my favorites.
So yeah, our plan for this is we're gonna do weekly episodes where we talk about two movies each. One's like a blockbuster Hollywood movie, and one personal pick that might be lesser known that we both really like. We're gonna format them as just like a discussion about the movies. Hopefully, go into a little bit more detail than a lot of the other YouTube channels out there that I've seen. And just one thing to note is that every episode is going to be a spoiler episode. So if you don't want spoilers, this isn't the channel for you.
Yeah, I feel like if we don't talk about spoilers, it's hard to really get into the heart of a movie. So, in our opinion, it's kind of a waste of time. And if you do care about spoilers, watch the movie first, then come back and watch our videos.
So the very first movie we're going to be talking about in this is Wonder Woman 1984, directed by Patty Jenkins.
This world is not yet ready for all that you will do. Your time will come, Diana.
So we both watched this movie recently. What was your overall enjoyment of this movie?
I mean, typically, I'm not the biggest fan of superheroes in general. This movie to me just felt kind of like most other superhero movies made for much younger audiences. It was very superficial, and the plot didn't really make that much sense to me. There was a lot of cheap plot devices, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, that's what I kept saying. The script for this movie is like a complete mess where like the characters and like themes are like all over the place. It's like almost like a comedy. If I was a teacher of like a script writing class, I would use this as an example of like what not to do.
Yeah, it's just it's like I get there's cool magic and the idea, which isn't even a new idea. It's almost like the main plot device, like the wishing stone. That's something that's been talked about in many movies before. It's just they tried to make it their own twist by kind of taking out like the evil aspect of it, but by saying, "Oh, you don't have to trade your soul to make a wish with the devil." It's that classic plot, but they almost like toned it down, and then they kind of lost the impact of it. But yeah,
Yeah, everyone's familiar with like the monkey paw type where like careful what you wish for, but this one like they tried to like over explain it, but then they also didn't explain it. Like you have to give something up, but it's different for everyone and it's just vague and confusing.
yeah, it's like I don't know. There's that movie Bedazzled with Brendan Fraser in it. It's pretty much the same movie. He's like, "Oh, I want to be rich. I don't like my life." So he makes a deal with the devil, I think, to sell his soul, if I remember the movie right. And then his wish is like, "Oh, I'm gonna be rich." But then the devil makes his wish come true, and he's like a drug dealer in some crazy country, and like everyone's after him, and he's like gonna get arrested and killed. So he's like, "Oh, well, that's not what I wish for. I need to be more specific." So it's kind of like that ironic twist that's like deceitful and kind of tricks them into it, and then they come to the realization, oh, my own life is actually fine, I shouldn't do that. And then like it
Yeah.
kind of works in this movie for the main characters, I guess, but then they kind of expand it to everyone in the world, and that the whole logic of that just falls apart very
Yeah,
quickly.
and then they try to over explain it with a great speech from Wonder Woman at the end that literally makes no sense, and I'm sure we'll get into that later. But let's
Yeah.
start from the beginning where this movie had two introduction scenes. One was a very long and very boring ninja warrior obstacle course race where Wonder Woman's a child racing against adults. And then immediately after that, it cuts to the 80s where there's like a cheesy 80s mall robbery scene. So what do you think about these two introductions that it has?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's just very strange to have the two introductions anyway, and tonally they're both completely different. We'll start with the first one where she's like on the Wonder Woman island, and like it kind of made sense to me because like I vaguely remembered the first movie when the first Wonder Woman when I saw it, so I kind of remembered, oh, it's like this weird island of super women, I guess, or something like that. But like if you just only watch this one, I don't think you'd really get it. I mean, I guess like okay, that's her super high level background. And then when looking at the movies, like any movie, like film analysis 101, like the first like 3 minutes or 5 minutes of a movie, you can kind of gauge what a movie is going to be like. And they try to, I think, like have the exposition for what the rest of the film is going to be like. In this one specifically, they really overhandedly tell you the theme. And the intro theme is pretty stupid. It's like she's riding her horse, falls off a horse. Then she takes like the slide to go down to catch up because she like fell off and is losing. But and then she tries to finish the race ahead of everyone, and then they're like, "Oh no, you can't do that. You cheated. No cheating. Cheating's bad. You have to follow your heart."
Dude,
And
but
listen to the
it's
truth."
not even like that straightforward though. Like the lady explaining it to her is just like speaking in riddles. Like it's not like she's just saying words with like no substance. Like
Yeah,
it's
it's just
like
superficial.
yeah, like they just keep saying the truth. You have to have the truth. And I just feel like that's just like a weird generic low effort thing to be saying in a movie like this.
Yeah, and even more onto that, it's not even clear when you're watching these events happen that she's cheating. It's like she goes down a slide. It's almost to be like, oh, she's being kind of clever and like catching up. And it's like, I don't know. It's not clear to me that she's cheating or breaking the rules necessarily.
Well, the big thing for me is that scene was incredibly boring. Like, who
Yeah.
cares about her jumping on sticks? Like, it's a superhero movie. Like, you think they could have had something better than that. And I looked it up after the movie. That scene is over 20 minutes long of just basically her riding a horse. Like, it was so boring and pointless.
It's also kind of funny too. The movie, they did this a lot with it. It's like it's kind of a serious tone. Like it's like the child running, which is just absurd in itself. They don't explain why she's like the golden child. Why is she the only kid? I mean, I guess she's more gifted than the others, maybe. But then again, they don't explain it like they do with a lot of stuff. But the
Well,
way
I mean, it's one of those things I was like explained in the first movie, and then they
yeah,
just kind of. But
that's what I mean. If you didn't see the first movie though, but either way, it's besides the point. Just me.
it was just
my lack
long.
of superhero movie
Yeah,
logic.
exactly. It was just long and unnecessary. So then right after that, it goes into the 80s style mall robbery scene, which was honestly probably my favorite scene of the whole movie. I just felt like an 80s movie, and that's what I was actually hoping to get out of this movie, was just like cheesy 80s-ness. But what did you think?
Yeah, no, that when I first watched it, it was very lighthearted and silly, and the action was kind of fun at least. Like there was like the goofy, dumb
Yeah, exactly.
robbers doing dumb stuff. It's very lighthearted, and then I had like that zoom in on the little girl's face that
Yeah,
she saved, which was really
exactly.
funny.
And
But
then
it
like
worked.
with DC movies specifically, I feel like they always take themselves super seriously, especially like I can't even take Zack Snyder seriously anymore. But I really liked how lighthearted it was, and it was just like silly, and that was like a fun part of the movie.
Yeah, but it wasn't carried necessarily throughout. Like some of those were sprinkled in there, I guess. But like it's super like contrast or like the juxtaposition of that first scene that's taken super
Yeah.
seriously. Like the only
Yeah.
funny part in the first scene is she's riding the horse, and how she gets behind in the race and like cheats is because she runs into a branch
Yeah.
just like around a corner, which is just super stupid. But the rest
Yeah.
of the scene's taken so seriously. It's like that's kind of how the rest of the movie is, except for that second intro in the mall. The
Yeah,
second
exactly.
intro works.
The
but-
second intro was like so out of place for the rest of the movie, which is probably why I liked it so much. So like that was one thing too, like that has the year like 1984 in the title, so I thought it would have like a lot of 80s themes. But all of the 80s stuff is kind of just like thrown in as an afterthought and doesn't really have anything to do with the movie.
Yeah, I
Never-
mean it's kind of just like a nice backdrop, I guess. Like there are some outfits, like the Chris Pine like fashion scene was
Yeah,
kind of funny,
But that I just felt like it was like, oh, this movie takes place in the 80s, so we have to have a montage. We have to have this, but it actually doesn't like add anything to the movie. It doesn't drive the plot forward.
No, you forget that it's even in the 80s like after the first like act of the whole film. Like it has nothing really relevant to the plot.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of like a cool backdrop. And I guess that's passable. Like some movies do that, and it's fine, but this literally has 84 in the title.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Exactly.
Yeah, it's just not important to the story at all or the themes. There's really no point other than like a head nod to, oh, this is the 80s. Yeah, 80s are cool. Nostalgia. Haha, that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
But
But then they even do that poorly too, because like I was hoping to have like one 80s like banger pop song throughout the movie, and there wasn't. There was like some generic 80s. Like I'm no expert on like 80s music, but I didn't recognize like any of the songs. Some of them had like that 80s sound, but it wasn't like any of those like real popular ones. Like I think it would have been great when Kristen Wiig's character was like at the gym. They play like that Maniac song when she's working out and has like her new cat powers. Like I feel like that something like that would have worked really well in this movie.
And without that, those scenes felt super out of place. Like I remember when I was watching it, I was like, oh, she's in the kitchen. Kristen Wiig just discovering her superpowers now. Then she like goes up to the fridge and like actually rips off the refrigerator door and is like, that's kind of wacky. And then like I think maybe it cuts back to Wonder Woman or something, and then it goes back to Kristen Wiig at the gym, and she's like lifting super like heavy stuff, and all like the steroid roided out dudes in the background are like, oh wow.
Yeah, but I feel like that could have been
though.
Yeah, it could have been done so much better. Like they could have done like the gag with like the music and like the dancing or something, and then have the weightlifting part at the end.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
just,
they could have done that too. And it's like, okay, it's in the 80s very clearly, but like besides the fact that they're kind of dressed like 80s, like the editing techniques, none of the filmmaking style is really reflective of an 80s movie.
Yeah.
It still feels like you're
that's
watching a normal superhero modern movie.
exactly.
It just happens to take place in the 80s. So
Exactly.
It's like they did like the
Exactly.
throwback to it, I in the idea, but like the most minimal effort throwback to 80s
I
film.
agree. I agree. They were definitely thrown in as an afterthought, I feel. But let's move on to more stuff about the plot. So I guess Wonder Woman has just been like an archaeologist for like 60 years
Yeah,
from the first movie.
there was no like, what did she do in the last 6 years? She had like no friends. How did she become an archaeologist? There's so many questions that they don't address at all.
Yeah, and it's just like pointless stuff. It's because like the plot needs these things to happen. Like she needs to like bump into the stone, and like she needs to like get the golden armor for no reason.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like they didn't even have to throw that in there. It just was kind of like dumb. They could have just had like a bad guy who's like a con guy on TV, and it's like, oh wow, this guy's slowly gaining more power. That seems suspicious. And then they kind of discover, oh, he's using the stone or something like that.
Well, that's like my big problem
intro.
with this is that they made everything as convoluted as possible. Like every plot point just has unnecessary things that make it more confusing, where like a straightforward plot point would have been way more simpler. For example, when they bring back Chris Pine's character, because it's Chris Pine and they have to, why does he have to like possess another guy's body? And then like when she first sees him, she doesn't recognize him, but then she does recognize him. Then they like go to, what is it, Egypt, and they like put this man's body in danger. And
it's just so weird, and especially because with the other Wish logic that they show, it's like the guy's like, "Oh, I need to see the president," and then he just kind of like teleports the president. Then the president's like, "Oh, I was doing something else, but now I'm here. That's strange." It's like, it's just so off. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. So then let's go into the whole Wish thing, which is another. So I kind of get it. I feel like what's the actor's name that played the bad guy?
Pedro something.
Pedro Pascal. So I get his character. He like he's greedy and wants to become rich and powerful, but like he just like as soon as he becomes a stone, he just goes insane for some reason, and he just wants more power and has to have everyone in the world make wishes for some reason. Like, what was going on?
The only thing that made sense to me for that is, I think because they alluded to it when it's like the stone causes the end of civilizations when they're kind of doing their history lesson in the archaeology lab. So I just kind of assume, okay, they get completely corrupted and like their mind gets warped by the stone is kind of alluded to, but that's not explained. That's just my assumption.
I mean, that's what it's alluded to too. But then on top of that too, it's also like the monkey's paw thing, where you like be careful what you wish for. So like it's both of those things, or It's
Yeah,
just
well,
so poorly done.
another really confusing part of it to me was, okay, it seems like he was making all the wishes, and then they're kind of like, oh, it's going to be self-destructive now. So it's like, okay, so he's making the wishes, so he's kind of like dying, like he's bleeding out of his eye and nose and ear or whatever because he's making too many like wishes. So then he's like, oh, I've been making too many wishes. The only way to get more power is to make more wishes. So it's like, wait,
Yeah,
what? So then he
yeah,
has to get everyone to wish for him to feel better, and then
yeah.
he gets to decide what to take from them. It's like, it's just so like, what?
Yeah, like I feel like it just would have been so much simpler if it was just like every time he makes a wish, he gets like a little bit weaker. But like if he got a whole bunch of wishes at once, then like he would become like a god or something, like something really simple like that. I feel like would have done better than these vague things. Like in the movie, even Wonder Woman was confused and she's like, "Isn't it enough?" And he's just like, "No, I want more. I want more." Like,
Yeah, it just, I felt like they kind of took, like, on paper the theme was, oh, it's like from English 101, oh, absolute power corrupts absolutely. So they just like took that but didn't bother to dive any deeper in exploring that idea and like giving an actual example of it. They're like, oh, power is evil. If you get power, you're evil. And
yeah,
then that's kind of the end of the thought. They don't
yeah.
really tie it to an actual person going through gaining power. They're just like, oh yeah, it corrupts. That's just a fact. And
Yeah,
then they just brush it
exactly.
off.
Exactly. And then like another thing too, it's just like literally everyone is in the world is greedy and selfish.
Yeah.
Like and to my next point, so once he like has like everyone making wishes, I love how the world just like immediately falls into chaos and like people are like dying in the street and it shows like a mom getting her child like torn away from her and stuff.
No.
It was so weird because it just like happened like instantly like that.
It was so quick, and it's just because of the stone, he just immediately forgot about his son. Like he was
Yeah.
so corrupt with power, he just left his son like
Well,
alone somewhere. Like what? Like does he have
yeah,
a
that
babysitter? Who's what happened to his wife? Like there's so many questions. It's like what?
well, that was another thing that was confusing too. It's like, what if wishes contradict each other? Because it clearly shows the son wishing that he could spend time with his dad, but he didn't like instantly go there or something.
Yeah,
It
something
doesn't.
with touching, I guess. Like he wasn't touching, so he interrupted the wish. But then they can use TV particles
Yeah,
to touch
exactly.
people. Like it's just so like that's unnecessary. Like they really
Yeah,
didn't need like
yeah,
they could have thought of something a little bit more creative. And even with the introduction of the particles through the TV, like the president explained it, you're just like it's just so weird and out of place, and just like it just felt like superficial, cheap writing to move the plot
yeah,
forward. Like I think
exactly,
that's the whole thing.
exactly.
This movie's not meant, it was not created to be looked at or thought about deeply. This is literally you go in, turn your brain off, fun, silly action movie. As soon
Well,
as you start
I
scrutinizing
mean,
it, it just completely
f-
falls apart.
I'm fine with those kinds of movies. Like that's the difference between like Jurassic World and Jurassic World 2. Like Jurassic World 1, like they just wanted to make a big dumb dinosaur movie and like that was fine because that's exactly what it was and I enjoyed that one. But then in the second one, it's just like insultingly dumb and like how dumb they think their audience is by like having so many like inconsistencies and things that don't make sense. It's just like if they just put a little bit effort, like
Yeah, it's like you would think that since their whole point of the movie is to make them like as generic as possible and appeal to a wide audience, like you don't need to have a complicated script to do that. You just need to have
mhm,
kind of like a core universal theme, which they had it on this movie. The kind of like, oh, the truth will set you free. Don't lie or don't cheat. These are very basic things, but
mhm.
there's no tie to an actual character to like make you care that much. Like it's
Yeah,
just so surface level, and it's not
yeah,
really a good example of it. And then it gets so convoluted that you're kind of trying to figure out what's going on,
yeah.
and like you kind of know, but it's still like weird.
Well, that's what I think is really funny too. So it's very confusing, and then I feel like at the end of the movie they knew how confusing it was, so they tried to give Wonder Woman have a big speech at the end to have everyone undo their wishes. But then if you listen to her speech, she's also just speaking in riddles where it doesn't really make any sense. She's just saying like nothing's.
Yeah, it was like it's like, oh, listen, people, the lies that you say, like the cheating, the truth is there. You must listen to the truth because the
The truth
lies are
makes the
not
world a
good.
better space, a better
Yeah.
place, or something. Where it's just like, okay, well, you know what? If I have cancer, I'm going to wish for my cancer to go away. Am I going to renounce my wish now because Wonder Woman told me to?
Yeah, it's like what if someone had like a child who was dying of cancer,
Yeah.
and then they're like, "Oh, I want my son to be alive to live to be 15 or something because they're dying." And then Wonder Woman's like, "Oh, you know what? The truth will set your kid free. You need to accept your son is
Yeah,
dying." And it's just,
exactly.
yeah, sorry. Like what? And then I think they purposely didn't show any of the good wishes. Like instead, they chose to
Yeah.
show like was it like that terrorist dude who's like in somewhere in the Middle East with like an AK, and he's like, "I wish for all of the nukes." And
Yeah.
then like oh, she uses her magic truth whip, and then all of a sudden he's like, "I don't want the nukes." Like in the same exact
Yeah.
location. Like what? Like,
Oh, but
it
I
was so
did
in
love
your
the part where
face.
the couple was arguing and she was like, "I wish you were dead."
Oh yeah, I was like,
That was a great scene right there.
yeah, and it's like, oh, I wish all the Irish would go back to their country or something
Yeah.
like that too. It's like, oh Jesus Christ, like it got dark so fast, and it's just such a strange movie
Okay, so
with that.
I have two things I want to say about the ending of the movie. First of all, when Wonder Woman fought the CGI cat lady, that was probably the worst action scene I've ever seen in my life. It was like extremely dark. They were just like swinging around doing whatever. I couldn't tell what they were doing. And then they like go underwater. And then I don't even remember what happens after that because like it was just so
They were
lame.
swinging from the electrical wires. And
Yeah.
then I guess they were underwater. Wonder Woman used the electrical wire, which I think was already underwater. But then for whatever reason, even though they all should have been getting electrocuted, she like touched it to the Kristen
Yeah.
Wiig cat character, which is why did she turn into that weird animal? Like, I get she wanted to be like the ultimate predator, but like they just made her into like a silly character from like Cats. It was like the villain from Cats that I like the Broadway remake. I was like, what is happening here? It was just so like silly. It didn't look cool. I just
Yeah.
it was just
Yeah.
so strange. It was just so strange.
And
And I
then I
think
also oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, and that seems to be a very common thing with superhero movies. It's like it's almost like they feel like they have to have this big crazy fight scene at the end. Like I had the same issue with Black Panther. I mean, they had that big war,
Yeah.
which was cool. They're like on rhinos and stuff. But then Black Panther's like in that weird dark subway tunnel thing,
Yeah.
a horrible CGI outfit, just spinning around, like flying and stuff. And it's like, I don't care about this. This isn't a good fight. This isn't a cool action fight. It's not
Yeah.
like well choreographed, like a real martial arts action scene. Not that it has
Mhm.
to be real martial arts, but at least be creative and interesting and like not all CGI'd and like a very obviously noticeable
Yeah.
CGI
Well, I
too.
did like it in Deadpool 2 when they make a joke about that, where I think Juggernaut fights Colossus, and he's like, "Okay, time for the big CGI battle at the end of the movie," and I was like, "That's exactly how all of these movies are."
Yeah, it's just how about instead of having like probably a few like $10 million to just edit that one scene and make it look whatever, maybe put a little bit more time into like exploring the themes and like a more thought out character development in the script. I don't
Well,
know.
I feel like it too, just wasting so much money on like the CGI and stuff. They could have just done like since it's not like fighting like a giant monster man or anything, it's just like Wonder Woman versus a cat lady. They could have done like a well choreographed like punching each other
Yeah,
action scene.
exactly. And that
Like, yeah.
would have been cool. Like at least Star Wars made a little bit of effort with like didn't
Yeah,
they
at
have
least their
like real
lightsaber
martial
fights.
arts people?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it has Donnie Yen in it, so I mean, I'm not going to complain about that. But
Yeah, exactly. That's I mean, just a little bit of effort goes a long way. And
hmm
with this, it just felt like you were kind of just cheap grabs. Like, oh yeah, you know what, we need a better villain that's actually friends with Wonder Woman. So let's throw in Kristen Wiig's character so she can kind of be portrayed as like a twist midway through the movie, which doesn't really matter at all to the plot or the main villain.
Okay, yeah. So if we're gonna get into characters, so let's start with Christian Wiig's character. So like at the beginning of the movie, she's like the main like character. She's in it quite a bit at the beginning, like setting it up, and she like is the one who lets the stone get stolen and stuff. But then she kind of just disappears for most of the movie, and then comes back for the action scenes at the end. But if you remove her character from the movie, like literally nothing changes. Like she didn't drive the plot at all. And I like Christian Wiig. It's just like bad screenwriting again.
Yeah, it's just not necessary. And I feel like they did want to do like that kind of twist halfway through the movie where like she betrays them, but it's like her and Wonder Woman, they don't really have any connection or friendship really. Like they have that one like dinner
That
together where she's
yeah.
drinking wine, but God, that dialogue is just horrible. It's like I think she literally asked her like a couple questions in, like into the dialogue. Oh, have you ever been in love? Like, what?
Yeah.
Wouldn't you ask? Oh, do you have a boyfriend, or are you dating someone? Like,
Yeah.
there's just
Yeah.
so many weird things like that are just so in your face. It's like, are they trying to be cheesy? If they are being cheesy, it's not coming across well. Is it trying to be a joke? Is it
It's
trying to
just
be cringy? It's just
it's
like
just
poorly
bad.
done.
Yeah, it's just bad dialogue. Like, I feel like everything in this movie is just like half-assed. So like again with Christian Wiig, there's like that scene where that um she's nice to the homeless guy, and then it shows him like once she like gives him a sandwich, and then after she like makes her wish and is becoming evil, she like yells at him to go away. But like, what's the point? Like, I feel like it was trying to say like, oh, she gave up her kindness, but like it's just like a really convoluted way of saying that, and it's not clear, and it's just like unnecessary.
Yeah, and again, it's not clear because for me, I saw that as it's like, oh, she's getting her confidence. Like she's kind of this like weak, kind of beaten down, awkward, not attractive girl. So she's kind of sad about it because she'll never be like the hot girl, I guess. But then she gets her confidence back, and it's like, oh, because she wishes for it. So now she's like,
Mhm.
oh, I can stand up to those men catcalling me and like talk them down and tell them no, and I can beat them up now. Like I don't have to be controlled by men.
Well,
But
she did a good
even
job,
yeah.
like when she beat up that. Well, I mean, more than beat up that like guy who sexually harassed her earlier in the
Mhm.
movie. I feel like that was a good representation, but then they always have to do like some extra thing that doesn't make sense, like they did with the homeless guy.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like if you're trying to make a movie that's kind of promoting feminism and like standing up to like men harassing you, that's a good thing to do. That should be portrayed. But then it's like she does that to the extent where she becomes evil. So very quickly she's almost taking it too far. So then it's almost in a way, if you're trying to kind of promote feminism, it's saying like, oh, but it can be evil to stand up to men if you take it too far. So it's like that's just kind of destroying the whole point of
Well,
feminism. And say, is
well,
it
that was
saying you should
another
stand up or shouldn't? Like it's just
another
silly.
yeah, yeah. Another thing I noticed too is like when Wonder Woman and Christian Wiig, after she makes the wish, when they go to like the parties or whatever, all of the men are like aggressively hitting on them, like aggressively telling them like how beautiful they are, and like Pedro Pascal's character like immediately like is hitting on them and stuff. Like I understand that the movie is definitely going for like women empowerment, but then like Christian Wiig is like super jealous of Wonder Woman, and it's kind of like a jealousy thing, and it ends into like a literal cat fight at the end of the movie. And then Wonder Woman like can't get over her dead boyfriend of 60 years, which isn't very like empowering theme message either.
Yeah, it's like, oh, if you truly love someone, I guess you can only have one true love, and then you just have to be hung up on them for the rest of your life for 60 years. I guess it's somewhat wholesome, sure, but I don't know, it doesn't feel that much of like a liberal view on like how women should act. It just feels like it's something like a man wrote kind of superficially, just threw it in
Yeah,
there.
well, I feel like if this movie was actually made in the 80s, then it would be seen as progressive. But since it's not, it's not.
Yeah. I don't know, but it's either way. We're just kind of interpreting and projecting these ideas and themes because they're not clearly shown or established in the
Yeah,
movie
yeah,
at
we have to
all.
like fill in the blanks ourselves. So
Which
yeah.
is just, and it's not an art house movie where you're supposed to be interpreting it. It's like literally just a failure of scripture. They're trying to explain it, and it still doesn't really work.
Okay, let's just talk about Wonder Woman's character in general. So first of all, she's very passive in this movie. I felt she's kind of just like reacting to things around her. And like the perfect example is like when she goes to Egypt to find Pedro Pascal, like she doesn't actually like find him. They're just driving, and then she happens to see them driving
Oh
in the other
yeah,
direction, and she's like, "Oh, that's him."
yeah. There's so many weird things like that just pop in there, and then even
Well, yeah,
with that.
everything's
Oh, go ahead.
everything's just like thrown in for convenience. Like Chris Pine's like, "Oh, what's that?" And she's like, "Oh, this is the magic golden armor that someone was sent to me anonymously." And I guess it was because it wanted to do like the post-credit scene. But then, like, so she has the armor, and then she brings it to the fight, and it literally does nothing. It's just like all these random things are just happening to Wonder Woman, and then she's just reacting to them.
Yeah, and I feel like she doesn't really have like any stance on anything. It's like I get she's trying to speak like her truths. So it's like everything she tries to tie. It's not like she doesn't feel like a real person. So like instead of
Yeah,
reacting like a normal person, like, oh, this guy is a jerk, we need to do something. He's like, oh, he's not following his truth. Trying to, and it's
yeah.
like it's just weird how she says stuff. And I mean, I don't know. I'm not the biggest fan
Well, I think
of her as an actress. I don't think she just is delivering them that well. I don't
Yeah.
know any of her lines.
Well, I feel like I heard someone else say like she's not an actress, she's a model. So I feel like in these movies she's always like trying to strike a pose. But I mean, it's
Yeah, I don't know.
whatever.
I just feel like they
Yeah.
didn't give her any personality to work with either. I mean, I don't know
Yeah,
if it's
yeah.
her as an actress or just bad script. It's like
Yeah.
as a character, it's like we know nothing about her life in between the first Wonder Woman and where we are now.
Yeah.
Does she have any friends? I guess she's kind of cold and putting everyone off because she's still sad about Chris Pine. So I
Mhm.
think that's the movie logic. But even so, it's like she doesn't have any personality other than, oh, I believe in truth and I miss Chris Pine. Okay, sure.
Okay, so let's go on talk about the only likable character in this movie, which is Chris Pine's character, which is definitely the best character in the movie, same as the first movie. But I feel like he's like the only rational one. Like he even is the one who like sacrifices himself so Wonder Woman could get her powers back, even though she didn't want to when the world was ending around her. He was basically the only reasonable person in the whole movie. What do you think about him?
Yeah, I liked him the most. I did like the kind of fish out of water story they had with him where he was like trying on the clothes and stuff. I feel like that part is kind of like lighthearted humor. It worked very well.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, I
I,
like that too because I felt like in the first movie, Wonder Woman was a fish out of water in like World War I era, and he was showing her everything, and then in this one, he was the fish out of water, and Wonder Woman was showing him everything. So I thought that was a good contrast compared to the first movie.
yeah, but he was good. And then he was like pretty quick to like the first one to admit, oh yeah, I'm already dead. So like you gotta let me go or whatever. And that one scene, and that scene, oh my God, that was the dialogue for that was like, it was almost a heartfelt moment. I feel like the dialogue just
almost
ruined it for me. It's something like she's like, oh, I can't say goodbye again. And he's like, I'm already gone. You don't
Yeah.
have to say goodbye. And then she just like, and then she literally just immediately turns around and walks away like abruptly. And then she's like walking away crying. I'm just like, oh my God, who would say that? It's not, I don't know. It was kind of took me like up until then. I was like, oh yeah, it's kind of sad. She has to let Chris Pine die again. Like that sucks. But then
But it was another thing
it was just
too.
so weird and unfortunate. And then he immediately disappears.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. It was like really out of place too because like it's also the scene right after like everyone's making the wishes and the world is just like in chaos. So then like it's just like all these silly things are happening in the background, and then they try to have like this heartfelt moment where he's sacrificing himself, but then it's like showing like I said earlier, like the mom is getting like her child pulled away from her, and like these ridiculous things are going on everywhere.
Yeah, they could have had like kind of like a more like intimate moment, or like they're
Mhm.
isolated away from all of it. I mean, I feel like it was almost like trying to be. Maybe I'm just giving this movie way too much credit for what it actually is, but it's like, oh, they're showing all the chaos visually, like, oh, the world's falling apart.
Yeah.
It's like the mounting pressure on Wonder Woman because oh, she really needs her powers now, so it's her coming to that realization. But I don't think that was it. I mean, if it was, it wasn't executed that well, and it just kind of took you out of the moment instead of like showing it in like a kind of clever, good way.
Yeah. Well, it's just like another thing where things happen because the plot needs it to happen, not because like the characters are driving the plot. I feel like that happens a lot throughout this movie. Like for example, a World War I fighter pilot knows how to fly a modern day jet that's just like parked, fueled up, ready to go in the middle of like an airplane thing, and then suddenly Wonder Woman knows how to make things invisible because she saw her dad do it once.
Oh yeah, she's like practicing. She's like, oh, I made a cup disappear once, but I couldn't remember how to make it go uninvisible.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, they're gonna hint at like, oh, she's gonna make the plane go invisible, and that's gonna cause problems later because she can't make it go back to uninvisible.
Yeah,
or something like that. But no, they just didn't address it again.
Yeah, it was just something that needed to happen because the plot needed it to happen. And then even after Chris Pine sacrifices himself, like the next scene, she can just fly by herself by whipping lightning. I guess
she whipped a plane wing. Yeah, I don't know. And I guess
Well,
like because she denounced her wish, she was able to use Chris Pine's pilot skills as her own power of flight.
Well, I feel like
but like what?
I feel like then too they could have given her the golden armor then, and then she just flew there. But instead she like flies there, but then like goes home and gets the golden armor. Like I don't know what is going on.
No, that's what I was really hung up on, because yeah, I think the golden armor maybe gave her more power. I didn't think about that, but I was so confused because after she denounces Chris Pine, like the wish for him to come back, she immediately gets her powers back. She just can fly for whatever reason. And then it shows her flying through the sky multiple times. Then all of a sudden, she's just there where like Kristen Wiig is in The Bad Guy
Yeah,
with her
she's just
golden
like,
armor. Like, did she go back and get it? Was she wearing it under her clothes?
how did
she
she
make a
know?
pit
How
stop?
did she even know where the secret base was? Like,
It's just so strange. And that was another weird, like abrupt, like costume change. They did it earlier in like when she was in
yeah.
Egypt, when she was in the car wearing her normal clothes, and then it cuts away to the bad guy. Then all of a sudden she's like jumping in the air with her Wonder Woman, and I was like, what? Like, in her Wonder Woman outfit. It's like, where did she change? Was she just wearing it all the time? I don't think she had suitcases on her, did she?
Well,
Like,
it's just
it's
like
so
the
weird.
the movie thinks the audience is really dumb, and like it's one of those things. Like, yeah, if it happens once or twice, like you can kind of like overlook those kinds of things, but it happens like consistently throughout the entire movie, and then that's when it starts to bother me.
Yeah, and also like the whole jet thing was so ridiculous. It's like, okay, he can fly, sure, we need a plane. Got it. That makes sense because he doesn't have a passport. So that's the logic. Oh, how are
Yeah.
we going to get to where they are? Oh, you don't have a passport. Well, I can fly. So
But the
they're
thing is,
immediate.
too. Okay, wait. Get back to that. He does have a passport because he's not Chris Pine. He's some other guy. So
But
they could
maybe
just
that guy didn't apply for his passport. I mean, we don't know. We don't know these things. Like, yeah. It's so strange. But yeah, you're right. You're right. He is some other guy. You forget that by the like middle of the movie though.
yeah, because it's pointless. It's just like a pointless, convoluted thing that they decided to add for no reason.
And then yeah, so because of that, which they didn't even. But to your point, they didn't look to see if he had a passport. They have no idea if he actually does or doesn't have one, unless
Mhm.
maybe Chris Pine somehow gets that guy's thoughts because he like stole his body, and then he just knew subconsciously that he didn't have a passport. Like there's just so many strange questions. But anyway, their immediate conclusion after establishing, okay, we don't have a passport. What should we do? Let's go steal a military grade jet fighter. And it's like they didn't even realize they were stealing it. Like they just kind of show up there. They're like wandering around. Oh, and then all of a sudden, once they're taking off, then it's like, oh yeah, the security's like, oh, this is being stolen. What do we do? And then she's like, oh yeah, I forgot to mention that even if you fly really fast, there's radar. Like what? Like that was
Yeah,
such an out of place line
well, yeah, and it
too.
doesn't make sense. If there's radar, then it doesn't matter if they're invisible because it's like, I mean, I don't know how it works, but I'm sure it's not like a video camera scans the sky and sees it. It's like some type of sensor, like heat or sonar or something.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
they would be able to see it anyways, just because it's physically invisible. It doesn't go away from their sensors.
Yeah, I had that same thought too. Then I was like, okay, like as I'm watching the scene unfold, my brain was like trying to justify. It's like, okay, well maybe her powers are like other dimensional, so it's like she teleports it to like a different like realm or something, so it's not being detected. But then they show the invisible plane flying through clouds, leaving an impression. So it's like, okay, it's obviously still there in
Yeah.
the universe. So I don't think that would make it so it wouldn't show up in radar.
And like I said, these things don't bother me, but the thing is, there's so many of them, and like every scene in the movie, something like that happens where you just have to overlook it,
Yeah, it's
and
very dumb.
that's what's dumb about it. You know?
Yeah, it's almost like I feel like it goes back to the second scene where they're in the mall and the guys are doing the robbery, which still isn't really explained. Like, how do they know about the stone? Who are those criminals? Are they tied to the main con man guy?
Yeah.
But either way, it's like they kind of make it funny. Like they're so dumb, it's kind of silly. It's
Yeah,
like
exactly.
the one guy's running
exactly.
away, and then he's like, oh. Like the one guy's pretending to like act like he doesn't know the robber who like dropped the gun, so he's like acting stupid. And the guy's like, "Oh, what are you doing? We have to run." He's like, "Oh, thanks for calling me out." So it's like that kind of humor works for that scene. But then
Mhm.
for the rest of the movie, it's like they just kind of try to make it more cheesy and humorous, I guess, but it's just lazy and stupid. It's not really funny. It's not really lighthearted.
Yeah.
It's just like, what's going on? It's just, it doesn't work with the tone of
Yeah.
the rest of the movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay, so overall, would you recommend Wonder Woman 1984?
I mean, I don't think I ever recommend superhero movies to anyone. Maybe Shazam, I would. But I mean, if you want a fun movie with a female protagonist that's lighthearted and has a couple funny jokes in it, then you'll probably enjoy this if you enjoy other superhero movies. But I
I
don't know if I'd in good faith recommend it. Even for superhero movies, it feels worse than some
Yeah,
of
that's
them.
what I was gonna say. As far as I'm not a big fan of superhero movies either, but as far as they go, this is definitely one of the worst ones.
Yeah, I was watching it
Uh,
with my girlfriend. After finishing it, as soon as the credits rolled, she was like, "Wow, that was a hot piece of garbage."
I
Was her
mean,
reaction.
it's over 2.5 hours long, and just with that much time, you think they may be able to make like a good story, but they can't. So
Yeah, I feel like they just threw in that Christian Wiig character as like an after the fact thing. Like to your point, it doesn't really affect the plot at all. I feel like they just like, oh, let's add in a silly comedian to make the movie more fun because Wonder Woman's character is so blah. So they threw her
Yeah.
in, but then they just added an extra hour to the movie because they
Yeah.
didn't change the original script to work her in. They just kind of put her in there.
Yeah, well, I didn't know this, but I looked it up afterwards. Supposedly, the Cheetah Girl, I think her name is like Wonder Woman's main nemesis in like the comic books.
Hmm.
So I feel like maybe they just wanted to include that because of that for all of like the diehard Wonder Woman fans. But yeah, I don't know.
Well, and that's another big problem I have with all superhero movies in general is that they're all about universe building. So it's like, yeah, that's great if you know the Wonder Woman lore, sure, but that this movie exists on its own movie. It's not a TV show. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
it's part of the Wonder Woman series, but if
Mhm.
you're not that into superhero movies like me, you're just watching this movie, you just are confused and like like it should still make sense like without you having that prior
Yeah,
knowledge.
I agree. It should
Like,
still be able to stand on its own, and then like the greater universe stuff should be able to build on top of that, not the other way around.
yeah, like I remember I have a friend and he's super into superhero movies. He loves it. He's always like on top of everything, like before the movie comes out and knows the lore. Same for Star Wars. And like he knows I don't really like superhero movies, but like the few ones we have watched together or when I've seen it with him, he always like I'm always like, why did this happen? It doesn't make any sense. And he's like, oh well, that's because like in
Yeah.
this comic movie this happened, and then this is the background story and this. So yeah, it makes sense. But it's like, okay, why do I have to know all that now? Like, not that I'm being lazy, but it's like it's literally detracting from the enjoyment of the movie. It's not
Yeah,
like it's an added nice kind of touch to it. It's like literally just seems out of place and is ruining the experience for the non-informed viewers.
yeah, like if you wanted to get caught up with the superhero universe, now there's like hundreds of hours of movies you would have to catch up on.
Yeah, like well, what we were talking about before even deciding to start this podcast. You're like, oh, let's talk about Wonder Woman. I'm like, oh god, I need to go back into the superhero. Like, even if I wanted to go back to try to be super informed and on top of what's going on in like the DC or Marvel universe, I just don't have hundreds of hours to spend to watch all those movies. And
Well,
go
there's
deep
so many
into it.
other movies I'd rather watch.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's just so many, and it's just crazy. Like I don't want to have to watch all of those to enjoy one random head nod to a villain in Wonder Woman.
Yeah, exactly,
I don't
exactly.
know.
So you ready to move on?
Yeah, so we can move on to another movie that's also kind of superficial in a different way. Another indulgent kind of trash cinema, but trash in a good way. So this I want to talk about is Brawl and Cell Block 99, starring Vince Vaughn, directed by S. Craig Zoller. I think that's how you say his name, Zahler, Zoller, I don't know. This movie, I mean, my first impressions, before I get into it, if you like pulpy, kind of like over the top, gritty, grindhouse, like horror movies or crime movies, like this is for you. Go watch it. It's great. I don't want to ruin the kind of big surprise before we get
Well, I
into
mean,
it.
we are, but
Yeah, we are going to. So I'm saying, like, if you watch Bone Tomahawk, like Bone Tomahawk, that director's movie, go watch it now. But this movie, the ending is great. It's just so ridiculous. So S. Craig Zoller is a very non-mainstream film director, completely opposite to Wonder Woman.
well, he only has 3 movies that he's directed so far.
Yeah, he has 3 movies. So Bone Tomahawk was his first one, which was great. Like,
Amazing. Yeah, I love
yeah,
that one. Yeah,
it's like it's Western cowboys fighting a game of like cannibalistic tribal
It's
dudes.
it's basically a horror movie disguised as a Western movie.
Yeah. And like you don't know what's going to happen. Like the first, like same with this movie, like the majority of the movie is pretty just straight kind of like Western drama, or in this case, in the case of Brawl, it's like Vince Vaughn is kind of going through the prison system. It's a crime drama that's taken pretty seriously for the most part, which is why the tone feels kind of off when you're watching it.
Yeah, so I watched the trailer for this, but I think it came out in 2017, so I forgot about it, and it's been on my list of movies to watch. But I watched it because you recommended it. So when I was watching the first half, I was like very critical of it because it took itself very seriously, but then there were like some really cheesy, out of place parts. So I was like super critical, and I was like, why would they include that? But then when I got to the second half of the movie, the tone completely changes, and then I'm like, oh, so this is the type of movie that it is. So now those earlier parts that I was being critical of make a lot more sense.
Yeah, it's basically like a grindhouse kind of like exploitation, like pulpy movie disguised as a serious crime
Yeah.
drama with Vince
Yeah.
Vaughn. Like, so I thought the same thing too. I thought it was going to be a kind of serious, like kind of drama about prison, and it is at times. Like it does that well, but yeah, there's some dialogue and stuff in it that you're like, what? And like the acting's not always the best with some of the side characters in it. And like that first action scene where Vince Vaughn's on the pier, like doing the pickup that goes wrong. I mean, that one just felt a little weird and like, what's going on?
Well,
And why
that
are
was
they
like the thing I
shooting?
noticed
Like, what?
when he falls in the water, the Mexican guy, he goes like 8-ball corner pocket and throws a grenade at him, and I was like,
Yeah.
why would he say that when that's like the dumbest one-liner, and the movie was like super serious up to that point.
Yeah. So I think, I don't know if the director's trying to toy with us. I know he claims like in interviews, so that he takes his movies very seriously. But he's like talking about Vince Vaughn, for example. Like he wanted Vince Vaughn. He's like, oh, I always know Vince Vaughn. He doesn't overact. Like I hate it when characters in movies overact and they kind of take you out. You remember you're watching a movie. Like Vince Vaughn feels like a real person. And it's like, yeah. And he's like, I guess. And then he's like, Vince Vaughn, he's a big dude. And he is. He's 6'5". So in
Yeah,
this
they make
movie,
a joke about that in the movie, and I looked it up, but that was why I was hesitant of watching this movie, because every time I see Vince Vaughn, the first thing that comes to mind is like Couples Retreat.
yeah. I know, exactly. Same here. And at first, like I was kind of like taken back, like, it's Vince Vaughn, it's whatever. But as the movie went on, it wasn't as distracting. But it's because you kind of figure out that it's not trying to be super serious, and
Yeah.
You got to take it for what it is. It's like a pulpy kind of, not trash cinema, but grindhouse cinema in a way. Like I think he, in one of his interviews, he mentions it's like a 70s homage to that style of filmmaking, very similar to Pulp Fiction, like the Bruce Willis plot where him and the gang guy are like fighting, and then they end up getting like kidnapped by those rednecks in the pawn shop, and the gimp comes out, and you're just like, oh Jesus Christ. I like this movie packs that same punch, and really the ending of the movie. I guess we can start there because
Well, I was gonna say let's do first half versus second half of the movie.
okay, yeah, that makes sense. Let's do the first half. You go.
The first half, yeah. So I really enjoyed the first half. I mean, it was pretty standard setup, but I did like it. I felt like the characters all had their quirks, even though there's only like one main character. I feel like the other ones had personality. Like his friend Gil, like wasn't in it very much, but he still had like some pizzazz and like was memorable. And then even like the two Mexicans that did the job with him, they were kind of funny as well. So you remember the characters, even though Vince Vaughn is like the only character like in the real movie.
Yeah, and this movie, like to your point, it's a very simple, typical like script. Oh, guy who's kind of forced to the life of crime. Like just how it starts off is great. It's like a guy loses his job and he's like, ah, darn. Then he comes home and his wife is cheating on him. He's like, ah, shit. So like when I was watching it, I was expecting him to be like super mad and this kind of like not a likable main character who just goes home and like beats his wife or something, and then bad shit happens. But no, he takes a step back. He's like, okay, what do I have to do? I want a family. I want you in my life.
Yeah, it's like
I'm gonna have to.
how can we fix this? And I feel like it did a very good job of setting up like what he values. Like he values like family, and then it sticks to that value throughout the entire film. Like everything he does is to protect his wife and the unborn baby.
Yeah, and that's what you appreciate in him. That's why you root for him throughout the whole movie as more and more terrible, horrible stuff happens to him. Like it establishes his values. Like he's just a solid family man. He loves his wife and his unborn child. Like that's to his core. He loves it more than his own life, more than what the law says, more than other people's life. So it's a very simple, relatable thing to make so you relate enough to him to be rooting for him in the end. And they just have horrible, terrible stuff happen to him. So even if he is a bad dude, you don't want that stuff to happen to anyone.
And he
like,
does like
so
everything
bad.
he does everything like without hesitation. Like as soon as like, oh, you need to like go kill this guy, he's like, okay, where is he? What do I gotta do? Like if he knows that it'll protect his family, like he's doing it.
And he stays true to those values. Like that's literally what carries him through. Like if he didn't have that happening, he wouldn't be able to do the things that he did.
Yeah, and then once he achieves that, then he's okay with like dying. So
yeah, exactly. And it doesn't take itself seriously. Like it's not grounded in reality. I guess like the first half is like its depiction of prison feels very real. I guess we can get more into the style
until
of
it
the
turns
filming.
until it
Yeah.
turns into a castle with secret torture chambers behind bookshelves.
No, but this is the first. This is the first time. That's what I say. It's like literally 2 movies together, and I love it when movies just like yank the rug out from under you,
Yeah,
and you're just like,
yeah.
"What happened?" And this is very. I mean, I feel like typically when you're watching a movie, you know exactly what you're getting into. Whereas
Mhm.
this movie, in comparison to Wonder Woman, it established. It's not necessarily a theme of the movie, like the family values, but it establishes the character. And this is really more of a character study
Yeah.
movie, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
yeah,
Like, yeah, it's indulgent and fun towards the end with like the over the top gore.
yeah.
It's very consistent. It knows what it is. It's showing Vince Vaughn this world of crime. It's like an unfiltered look at this terrible shit that's going on.
Hmm.
And like you appreciate that. So like it knows what it is and it sticks to it, and it establishes that character, what he's going for, and that's the whole movie is him. And so, whereas like Wonder Woman, it establishes that kind of stupid theme at the beginning, like, oh, don't lie, cheating's bad because she cheated in that horse race. It's like
Hmm.
what? And that's loosely tied in with like the wishing
Yeah.
stone. Like it's just silly. Like I don't know, it just doesn't work. But this movie, it's going for a character study. It's going for a depiction of evil in a sense of the crime world, and it kind of shows that. So I mean, yeah, granted, completely different movies, completely different audiences, which is part of why I wanted to talk about it, because this movie, the budget was $4 million versus Wonder Woman, which was $200 million. So, and in interviews too, Zayler said that he wanted to make this movie with that budget because with 4 million, he can still have complete control over the script, complete control over the direction, and do whatever he wants with it. Which
Yeah,
shows
you could,
because yeah.
yeah, you could definitely tell like he had a vision for what he wanted in this movie and executed it how he wanted to.
Yeah, I mean the movie's definitely rough around the edges. Like it's not the most polished movie. It doesn't look nice.
Hmm.
There's some things that maybe don't work as well as others, but overall, like it's not trying to be something like that's perfect.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
almost feel like this movie was practice for his next movie, which is much more polished. It still has the same kind of vibe, but it's not as silly. Dragged Across Concrete. So this is kind of like the practice film, which also has Vince Vaughn in it. I mean, I don't know if that's true, but I don't know. I feel like he had fun with it, and it made a very, very entertaining kind of like gritty revenge indulgent movie.
Well, that's how I feel too. Like, I feel like if Vince Vaughn is going to take part in like a small movie like this, like he must have like got along with the director or like liked the vision that the director had or something, and not just doing it for like a paycheck movie.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like he's trying to reinvent his career because it is kind of weird that he would be in this. I doubt he knew the movie was going to be like this.
I mean, he wasn't bad
I
in
don't
True
know.
Detective, so
No,
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah, he is good. It's just hard when you're tied to that comedian career.
The couples masterpiece like Couples Retreat.
Yeah, he's good. And then I think if you in Dragged Across Concrete, Vince Vaughn's character is much better. It kind of plays into some of his silly quirks in it a lot more, and he feels a little bit more like a real person, not just like a superhero with like unquestionable family values.
Well, that was like I think after I
give
watched
him
this,
super strength.
yeah, after I texted you after this, and I was like, "Does he not feel pain in this movie or something?"
Yeah, I know. It's so funny. He doesn't feel any pain. He just keeps
like
pushing
the movie
through
only
it.
takes place over like a couple of days once like the shit hits the fan. So
Yeah, it's just kind of like it's fucked up, but it's kind of ridiculous too. Like his foot's like has shrapnel in it from the explosion, I guess.
Yeah.
And it doesn't heal at all through his entire like prison process. So he's in there with a messed up foot. That kind of just starts, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. And it's just, oh my god, it literally feels like he's just kind of like descending into hell. This like kind of like growing dread of things just getting worse and worse and worse. And then you're like, oh my god, this like it started as a crime movie, but it does feel like a descent into like a weird evil world, just terribleness.
Well,
Like
I mean,
there's
I also when I was watching the movie, I texted you and I was like, dude, did Eli Roth take over the directing of the second half of this movie? Because it literally turns into a B-horror movie in the second half.
oh yeah, well the gore, I mean, we love all that stuff, like the practical effects and stuff. I mean, it's just, I mean, god, the ending. I mean, I guess we'll get into that a little bit more later, but it's just so over the top.
Yeah. Well, I just think it's so funny, like when he finally gets to cell block 99 and then he figures out he was tricked and like the Mexican cartel is there. There's also just like an Asian guy in the background practicing martial arts.
Yeah.
Of course, he has to fight that guy later, but the guy has no dialogue. And then in every scene, he's just in the background practicing martial arts. It's just like, so funny.
Yeah, it's just that contrast of like it's like the movie plays itself straight for the first half of the crime, and they just start throwing in that stuff toward the end. I
Mhm.
mean, it's fun, and like we appreciate that. It's out of place, but it just works when you know it's kind of going for that 70s exploitation grindhouse
Yeah.
horror vibe.
Yeah, I mean, there's like poop everywhere when he gets to the other prison, and like it's
Yeah.
literally a castle with secret doors.
I know.
His room just has broken glass on the floor.
Yeah, I know.
Like,
Or even that weird like torture device where just like
yeah.
it's like a vibrating belt that just like shocks his stomach. It's just so bizarre. And yeah, I don't know. It's very unique, which is what I appreciate about the movie. Absolutely not for everyone, but it's just so strange. I haven't really seen a movie like that before,
Mhm.
which is what I
Well,
like.
I know I mentioned it on Wonder Woman, but it's another movie like Jurassic World 2, where the first half is one thing, and then the second half it just goes off the rails.
Yeah. Yeah, but I feel like one was an intentional going off the rails because Bone
Yeah.
Tomahawk kind of does the same thing. Like he's going for that kind of like heavy
Yeah,
impact
yeah.
ending where like you feel like a gut punch.
Well, this
Or
is like
s-
doing it well, where Jurassic World is doing it really poorly.
Yeah, exactly. I think a movie that's going for the exact same feel would be like The Green Room. That
Mhm.
one's another great one where it's like the punk guys are stuck in the back room of a show and they're trying to get like killed by a group of Nazis, and like the gore and the violence just feels so real, and it's kind of
Yeah.
like that sickening feeling.
Mhm.
Like this movie, obviously the budget wasn't there, so not nearly as like as impressive from like a technical filmmaking standpoint as The Green Room was, but
But it's
still
just like
it's fun.
a nice it's just like a nice horror movie.
Yeah, it's just a solid
Mhm.
horror movie that's fun and
Yeah.
doesn't take itself too seriously. It knows what it is, and
Mhm.
it's consistent. So obviously we're going to look at it as with a different lens than Wonder Woman.
Mhm. Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, let's get into the ending then. I mean, the ending is just literally, I mean, just that last scene. It reminds me so much of like the 80s or 70s like ending freeze frame movies. Like he gets the bad guy, he like curb stomps the dude's head into a toilet, and then like so it's just decapitated.
Well, then on top of that, they even make a joke where it's like, "Oh, the head's still alive for like 20 seconds after it gets cut off." I hope his is like that too, because it's just in the shit.
I know. And then like the cherry on top is like the security guards run in there and they shoot him in the head with like a pistol, but it's not just like a normal shot. His face just explodes. Like it's very clearly a dummy's head exploding. Like what? And then it just ends. Like it just rolls credits, I'm pretty sure. Or maybe it cuts back to the wife, but either way, like God, it's just so funny.
Well, I
But I
do feel
mean,
like a lot of like the side characters in this one were just kind of like stock characters, where Don Johnson was the warden, but it was like a very typical, like natural born killer, asshole warden guy who has a cigar. Like they're all just like stock characters, but I feel like it works really well because they weren't like in the movie very much, and they had like enough personality where they were rememberable.
oh yeah, yeah. Don Johnson was great in it. Just that kind
Hmm.
of that typical warden. Like it just works good. And even with it, like the characters are very cliche, but they feel much more distinct than like and make sense to me at least with the context of the
Yeah,
movie in comparison to like Wonder Woman. Like the bad
yeah,
guy in Wonder Woman, he's just this power hungry oilman, and it's like
yeah,
oh. Okay, well, why? What's his backstory? I mean,
yeah. Well,
they
like
don't
even
have it
like
in this, but it's like you don't need it. It's a very minimal
yeah,
movie.
they have like
Over explaining it.
enough personality, and they don't over explain things. Like when he meets like his drug dealer friend and they're in like the pool room, they have like a little conversation, and I feel like that's enough to like know his friend's personality. They didn't have to like over explain it or give us like a long backstory sob story. Like this character's not important. He's going to show up in a couple of scenes, come back at the end, but like he has enough of a personality where you're like going to remember him.
Yeah, and I think of like another a comparison back to Wonder Woman. There was like some guy in it. I think his name was Craig, and like they throw him in there. Like Wonder Woman's at like the donation thing at the beginning of the movie. Then that Craig guy just walks up to her and it's like, "Oh, hey, Wonder
Oh
Woman,
yeah.
I work at the White House now."
Yeah.
Woo-hoo. And you're like, who is this guy? How does he know Wonder Woman? Like it's just so out of place. Then she just dismisses him, and then it's like later he comes back and like he's just at the White House giving them
Yeah,
a tour. And
yeah.
it's like, who the fuck is this guy? Like, it's just so
That
stupid.
that he
And
can
it's
just
like,
like bring two randoms in and give him a tour of the White
I know.
House.
It's just so absurd. And it's like, why
It's
even have that in there, especially
because
because
the plot needs it to happen. That's why. Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, the plot needs it to happen, so sure. But they don't do. It's not even consistent, like with their plot devices and the plot needing it to happen. Because at the end of Wonder Woman, like you said earlier, she just appears. She knows that they're at that weird satellite broadcasting place in the present, and she just flies there randomly. Why have some guy tie her to figure out where it's going to the president's
but just have her
place?
like walking around in the White House. Like it literally doesn't matter.
Yeah. Or use her superpowers to get in there. Like by this point, wouldn't she have some kind of contact with the government if she's a superhero? Or is she trying to lay low? Like I feel like that's another kind of trope. Maybe she's just kind of like in the shadows, I guess, like a Batman superhero instead of working with the government. I don't know.
Well, no, if you look really closely in the mall scene, she breaks all of the video cameras. So I guess then you're supposed to know that she's incognito.
Yeah, I don't know. There's just so many just questions. I mean, and that's one thing we didn't quite talk about in the Wonder Woman review either. It's not as important. It's the particle explanation from the president of how the particles work in the satellite that takes over everything in the world.
I know they should just say it's magic. They just have like a different magic stone that lets you touch everyone or something. Like don't even try to explain these things.
Yeah, it's just silly. Or even like, oh, now that you're a person, your power is growing since you're granting so many wishes. So now you can reach people by overpowering TVs with your magic. Like so could have just wished that he controlled all the TVs or something.
That's what I like about the Ant-Man movies is because everything's inconsistent, but then they just say it's because of the Prim particle and they don't even bother explaining it. Oh, this happens. Yeah, it's because the Prim particle. Oh, that happens. It's because of the Prim particle. Like don't even try to explain it. Just say like we already know it's like a fantasy superhero movie. So just make up dumb superhero movie logic and don't try to explain it.
Yeah. I think Wonder Woman, what they were trying to do with the stone logic is like I think they're kind of trying to slowly reveal like the twist that there's a sinister side to the wishes. So they wanted it to like start that like, oh, you know, you make a wish and everything's great. She has superpowers now. Woohoo, everything's good. And they slowly ease into her becoming evil, like Kristen Wiig's character, I mean. But instead, they should have just established the logic beforehand. It's like, oh, if you make a wish, then something bad is absolutely going to happen. Like the guy with the getting coffee, they could have established it. But instead, they kind of hint at it. And then by the time where they need to be explained it, it's so convoluted and he's like deciding what he takes away and can influence it. And there's no limits on what he takes, it looks like. It's just out of place. Like what?
I feel like they can just add like simple throwaway lines to make things easier. Like there should have been a line where Kristen Wiig is like talking to Wonder Woman and she's like, oh, I may not have your looks, but like the thing I value most about myself is how kind I am. And then later when they're fighting, Wonder Woman could be like, oh, you were so kind and the stone took away your kindness and now look at you or something. Like, you know, like I feel like just a few lines of dialogue like that would just clear up all of the confusion.
Yeah, exactly. And then like obviously Wonder Woman's a much bigger, large scale budget of a movie, so I guess it'd be harder to keep things consistent with that. But still, like with like Brawl and Cell Block, like there's not nearly as much logic needed to be explained because it's not trying to do something completely ludicrous in it. But still, the one thing that needs to be true is the character's values for his family.
Yeah.
And his character stays consistent from start to finish. And that's really what the movie is. Like, yeah, it's very basic, but it sticks to that theme or that character, that driving force in him that brings him to survive, or not to survive, but brings him to survive the terrible stuff at the end. And that's like consistent throughout. Like, yeah, it's kind of a silly drama. Yeah, it's a pulp movie, but it
well, I mean, it is really silly. He seemed like more upset that his cell room like had poop in it than it did that like he got hit with like metal poles in the back 10 times. Like the metal poles in the back didn't seem to like affect him at all, but having poop in his room was like the worst thing ever.
Yeah, I think he just didn't feel pain. I mean, at the beginning, like of the movie, when he's all mad because he lost his job and stuff, like he just beats the shit out of his car. Like, he's just punching the car and stuff, and it doesn't seem to phase him at all. I don't know. It's just very silly. Like it tricked you to think it's serious, and then once you know it's not taking itself that seriously, it's just so enjoyable.
Well, it's so funny too. Like when the cartel is threatening him, they're like, "Oh, we have a Korean abortionist." Like that's his title, is the abortionist. Like,
no. No. Yeah, and that too. It's just so dark. I think that actress, it's John Carpenter's daughter too, is the one that plays it, and she has a small
Mm.
role in Dragged Across Concrete too. But that whole idea of like they kidnap her, then like they're gonna have the abortionist clip off the unborn fetus's legs and or limbs inside, so it's born with no arms and legs. What?
Yeah. Oh, one nice touch I like though, the cartel's like lawyer guy that was like working with the abortionist. He had really disgusting fingernails, and it
Yeah.
really disturbed me looking at his fingernails whenever he was on screen.
Oh yeah, there's so many just very unsettling, disturbing things like that. But no, it was good. I mean, I don't know how much more we can say about this movie, at least that I can. I mean, I think we
Well, the
covered a
thing is,
lot
this
of it.
movie, yeah, this movie was good. So like we can talk about the things that we like, but yeah, it's not like Wonder Woman where it's just all over the place. So there's a lot of things to talk about. But I just want to add that the at the end of the movie, it has very nice, over the top, ridiculous practical gore effects.
Oh yeah, yeah. I guess we should get into that. We can go more into the ending. But yeah, I mean, he just like he grabs the guy's face and like rubs it on the ground, and it's like his teeth are like being grinded down. It's just so violent, which I think is why you said it looked like an Eli Roth movie.
Yeah, and well, then he just snaps so many people's arms and legs in half.
No. Oh god. But it's rewarding. Like all the people that it happens to, like they pretty much deserve it. Like they're all just kind of terrible prison guards, I guess. I mean, the prison guards is a little more questionable, but at
Well, the
least
the
they're letting the
boxing
horrible
guy,
things
yeah,
happen.
that kind of felt bad for the boxing guy. He just wanted him to
Yeah.
join his boxing team, and then just beats the
Fun.
shit out of him for no reason.
Yeah, I mean, he had to do it to get thrown into the solitary confinement place, I guess, is the logic. But still, yeah, I did feel bad for him. They could have made him a
Yeah,
little bit more abusive.
yeah, they could have found some. He didn't have to beat up that guard specifically.
Yeah.
Oh, how funny was it when he locked like the one short guard in his cell in the block 99, and then he tried to stick his head out and he just smashed his
Oh, yeah.
head.
So good. Oh my god. Yeah,
Uh,
it was great. And I wasn't expecting those things to happen. Like when you're watching an
yeah.
Eli Roth movie, you want those to happen. So it's almost like you're kind of when they do happen, they're always a letdown now at this point in Eli Roth's career. But in this,
Mhm.
you weren't expecting them, and you're just like, oh,
Yeah.
it's just so refreshing to see some practical dudes' heads getting like stomped off versus like Wonder Woman in comparison, where the big climactic battles 100% green screen, poorly lit. I mean, I think Cell Block's poorly lit too, but it's a horror movie, so it
Yeah.
makes sense. And and at least that's consistent with the rest of it. But just that juxtaposition, practical effects of some dude's head exploding versus Wonder Woman all CGI.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
kind of refreshing to not see CGI in a movie nowadays.
Mhm, mhm.
But yeah, go watch. I guess what is your overall recommendation of
Yeah, I would, if you're like
Brawl?
a fan of horror movies, I would say definitely watch Brawl on Cell Block 99. I like Bone Tomahawk a little bit more, but I mean they're both enjoyable movies. So
Yeah,
definitely recommend. Yeah.
yeah, I agree. I enjoyed Bone Tomahawk more. I feel like it just seems like a little bit more of a grounded kind of like cinema type movie. This is a very raw uh style that he's going for in this one. I think his goal, especially with his newer movie Dragged Across Concrete, there's a lot of just long takes of really seemingly unimportant things happening. Like in Brawl, he's just going through the prison system, and it just shows it every step of the way. It's very slow and grueling, and some may say it's not necessary, but he's really going for that immersion, so you feel what like Vince Vaughn is going through in the movie. And same with his other movie Dragged Across Concrete. He wants you to be in there. There's not really that much of a score or soundtrack to these movies. All of the scenes he tends to lean more towards the longer things and showing just random kind of everyday small things to
Mhm.
put you into the immersion of the movie. He doesn't want to cut ever unless he has to, because he doesn't want to take the people out of the scene unnecessarily.
Yeah, my only criticism of Block 99 is the scene where Vince Vaughn kills the other drug dealers. I feel like
Mm.
his logic, I feel like no one would actually do that. He could have just ran away, but like he felt bad for the police because they were getting owned.
Yeah, no,
But
that scene.
I thought that was kind of a lame reason. I feel like they could have done a little bit more with that. But I mean, it's a very minor thing in the big picture.
Yeah, that scene bothered me too. I think also with that one, it just everything about it felt weird. Like the boat ride was fine. But then when the shooting started to happen, I don't know, there's the special effects of it didn't look that good. It felt like they were on like a weird set. I don't know. It just the filming of it seemed off. It looked kind of weird. Then he like jumps in the water and he's like pulling stuff out of his leg. And I think it's supposed to be like shrapnel from like an explosion. But I don't know. It just felt kind of like cheesy and like a set to me.
Yeah,
It took me out of it really.
that scene was like the only out of place scene I felt like it could have been done differently.
Yeah, I mean, I think there probably are a lot of other things like that. I mean, the dialogue is good, I think, for the most part. But yeah, there's some lines I just kind of feel like what, because he's going for that cheesy 70s vibe. And there's also just things that don't work as well necessarily.
Yeah, I feel like it had like with all, because there are a lot of like side characters that are only in 1 or 2 scenes, and some of it worked and some of it didn't. Like for some reason, I really liked it that the one security guard in the first prison was just like always picking his teeth, and I thought that was really funny for some reason. And it's just like a dumb thing that's there for no reason, but it really worked. But there were other things like that in the movie that I felt didn't work as much. But
yeah, it's just kind of weird to me that Bone Tomahawk, I don't know, it didn't have anything like that in my opinion. Like it felt pretty much like a higher budget movie than it actually was.
Yeah.
I guess. This movie, like, it felt like this should have been his first movie he made, and then he would go on to do Bone Tomahawk, I would think. But yeah, I don't know. I think it just has to do with budget and stylistic choices. I also saw when he was talking about the movie in one of the interviews that they had to move around to like a bunch of different filming locations in a very short amount of days for it. So that could have been why they didn't have much time to like scope out how to film certain scenes and stuff. Like probably the shootout, I would imagine, was probably you never had filmed something like that before. Maybe.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's hard to say, but it's still enjoyable for me. Once it got going, once he was in the prison, I think all that stuff was pretty good, and it wasn't enough to really distract. Like, I mean, with Wonder Woman, it had its problems too. Like we're talking about the stupid like plot devices that move it forward, and like 1 or 2 are fine, but when it's happening so much, it's just lazy filmmaking at that point.
Yeah.
Whereas in this, it's not nearly frequent enough to be an issue.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so yes, I would recommend it as well. Go watch Brawl and Cell Block 99 and Bone Tomahawk for that matter. Both good movies.
Won't last forever.
Minimum freedom.